For a little background, I'm a female, and this took place when I was in high school. It was my sophomore year, and I would describe myself as a pretty average student. I had a good group of friends that I would talk to at school and hang out with. Sometimes at the time this took place, I was not dating anybody when Valentine's Day came. It was just another day to me. But at my school, you could buy somebody a rose. Then it would get delivered to whoever you wanted it to during study hall by teachers' aides. It was popular for guys at the school to get their girlfriend a rose. So on Valentine's Day, that year I obviously wasn't expecting one in study hall. I was in Spanish class and just doing homework. I noticed a student enter our room holding several roses. And then she mentioned some names of other girls. They raised their hands, and she gave them their roses. Then she said my name, and I was really surprised. I raised my hand and she gave me one of the roses. I had no idea who had got me a rose. One of my friends that was in the class asked me who it was from, and I told her I didn't know. We started talking, thinking about who could have done it. I really wasn't aware of any guys that would do that. I sort of had a crush on this one guy that was on the football team, and we talked here and there. So I was kind of hoping that it was from him, but I didn't really think so. We weren't that close yet or anything. As the day went on, I was trying to figure out who sent me the rose, but I really had no answers. I talked with a few more of my friends, but none of them seemed to know anything either. Then I had my final class of the day, which was science, when it was over. I got back to my locker to get my things and go home. As I arrived at my locker, though, I saw that there was a note attached to it. I took it out and read it. The note said, "I see that you got the rose I sent you. I hope you like it." The handwriting was kind of sloppy, but it didn't give me any clues as to who left it. I looked around the crowded hallway, but still didn't have an answer, so I got my things and then left to walk home. During this time, I walked to school and back because I didn't have my license just yet, and we lived really close to the school. I would only take a few sidewalks the entire way, and it took me maybe 15 minutes to walk back most days. On that very same day, when I was walking home from school, I saw this guy walking behind me. It was kind of hard to tell because he was a really long ways back. I couldn't hear him walking or anything. I don't even know why I looked behind me. But at one point, I think about halfway back, I did look behind normally when I walked home from school. I was all by myself. So when I noticed the guy, it was a little bit unusual, but I still didn't think too much of it. He was this one guy that did go to my school, but I didn't know his name or anything. I just recognized him. He wasn't in my grade and was really tall with curly blonde hair and glasses. I walked the rest of the way home, and as I was going up my driveway, looked to the left and saw him. He was still a growl, really far ways back, and walking down the sidewalk towards me. I didn't know that he lived in my neighborhood, and I had never seen him walking before. It was kind of odd. I went inside my house and then went into my bedroom to finish my homework. I remember that as I was in there, probably about 15 minutes later, there was a knock on the front door. I was home by myself because my parents were both still at work. I got up and left my bedroom and went to the front door, but by the time I got there, whoever had knocked was gone. I looked around and didn't see anybody at all. Then I just went back to my bedroom. It was really strange. A couple of hours later, my parents got home from work. I remember that my mom came into my room and dropped an envelope on my desk. She said that it was on the front step when they got home, and my name was on it. I was even more confused. Now I opened it up and read it. It was from the same person who sent the rose to me and left the note on my locker. The letter said that he saw that I got the rose and letter and wanted to meet me before school at 7:30 a.m. The next day I was supposed to go to the back parking lot. I knew that there was a pretty good chance that it was the guy who followed me home. I found it creepy that he was being all mysterious, and I had never talked to him before, and I didn't find him attractive at all either. I decided to go just to tell him that I appreciated the rose but was not interested, and he didn't have to follow me home. Normally I would get to school at about 7:30 anyways, and school started at 7:50. So when I got there, I went into the back parking lot. This parking lot was pretty quiet and just overflow from the main other two lots. It was mostly used for football games or other sports, and only a few kids would park their cars there for school. When I got there, there were a couple of cars parked around, but nobody was in the parking lot that I noticed. Then I saw a door open to one of the cars, and the same guy who followed me home came out. I knew that it would be him. He walked over to me and said hi. Then he told me that his name was James, and he was the one who sent me the robes. I told him I knew that, because he followed me home. He said he did that just because he wanted to leave me the prosins, Haitian said. Later, before I had a chance to say anything, he told me that we should talk inside of his car. I didn't want to because I didn't want to spend any more time there. I said no thanks. I had to get to class, and I started to tell him that I really wasn't interested in him when I said it. Though he said that I should go in his car again. He said that I should just hang out with him today, and he knew that I would have a good time. Then he said that we should skip school and drive someplace. I said no and started walking back. That's when he started to follow me, and I looked to see him walking quickly in my direction. I just started running at that point towards the school. He actually started to chase after me, running at full speed, but then he stopped shortly after I had made it far enough away that somebody in the main parking lot would have seen him chasing after me. I was able to get back to school after that. I hoped that I would never see him again. I remember that over the next few days he sent me a few messages on social media calling me names and stuff, but I just blocked him on everything. After that, I hardly ever saw him again. He was a senior that year, and I guess he skipped school a lot anyways. That was the craziest Valentine's Day I've ever had.
For a while, my husband and I were considering going on a double day. We had been together for 20 years and had 3 daughters. So we were happy in life, but getting bored in the bedroom, however, for the longest time, discussions about opening up our marriage felt too scary to pursue. Then one year for Valentine's Day, we just said, screw it, and decided to go for it. We looked on Facebook for potential partners as we didn't want to involve anyone we knew, and we were surprised by how easy it was to find couples and even entire communities of people eager to swap partners. The problem was we were also daunted by the overt nature of all the parties and hookups. It took us a bit to find a couple who seemed to share our mindset. But then we met Richard and Cynthia. Richard owned a small software company, so they had a lot of money. Yet they were still down to earth and respectful in our conversations on Facebook. We set up a dinner day for Valentine's Day, thinking it would be fine whether we decided to go all the way or not. We left our oldest daughter in charge of her siblings for the evening and drove to the restaurant. Richard and Cynthia were already there, but we were taken aback by how different they looked from their photos. Richard had a huge beard and bushy eyebrows covering half his face, and Cynthia's face was cram full of Botox, paralyzing it in a horrid expression. We sat down anyway and started talking, just regular small talk, but then Cynthia made a comment that weirded me out.
She asked what it was like living in our neighborhood, mentioning our exact neighborhood by name. I asked how she knew we lived there, but she just said it was on my Facebook profile. I nodded my head, but I was pretty sure I was careful not to put that out there. So a few minutes later, I excused myself to the bathroom. Cynthia followed me. Uninvited, I went into a stall and checked my Facebook, and my husband's, just as I suspected. Nowhere did anything mention where we lived other than the city, which has hundreds, maybe thousands of neighborhoods now. I had a really bad feeling about Cynthia. If she knew the neighborhood, did she already know the address? What kind of research did they do on us then when I came out of the stall? Cynthia was waiting for me, attempting to smile through her Botox. She said I looked nervous, then reached into her purse and pulled out a little white pill. She said it would help me relax and open up to this big opportunity. knowing what the hell it could be. I declined it, and on the way back I texted my daughter that we would probably be heading home early. Glancing at my husband's face, I could tell his conversation alone with Richard went about the same way. I tried to make up an excuse to go home as her daughter hadn't texted me back, but they insisted we at least stay for dinner and have a drink. They said we could still back out of what would happen after dinner, so even though we were uncomfortable, we stayed throughout the whole day. The conversation crawled awkwardly, and they slowly started looking at us more and more like we were prey. They even coerced us in getting dessert when it was finally over. They tried to get us to go back to their place with them, but we had had enough. We finally shook those creeps and got in the car to head home. My husband revealed he had also been offered a strange pill, cementing the fact that those people or bad news I still couldn't relax though, as my daughter hadn't responded to me, and when I called, she didn't pick up. I started to worry, and that's when she started sending me cryptic garble texts. She wasn't making any sense, but I knew something was up, so I told my husband to step on it. When we arrived at the house, we were met with the worst scene imaginable. The house was surrounded by cop cars and ambulances, and the front door was broken in. I ran out of the car and into the house looking for my Lee's daughters, but I only found cops. I started sobbing as I checked every single room. They were shouting at me, but I couldn't understand them. I thought I had lost my daughters forever. Then my husband finally took my hand and dragged me out to the backyard, where I saw my daughters all being questioned by cops. They were visibly shaken, but they weren't hurt. My oldest daughter ran to me and hugged me, apologizing for trying to sneak a boy into the house. I was confused at first, but she said she had planned to have her boyfriend over while we were gone. But when he arrived, he saw 2 windowless vans parked in the driveway. He warned her, and she was able to round up her sisters and took them into the shed in the backyard to hide, just as he saw the masked men get out of the vans and break into the house. That's when he called the police, but the kidnappers, thinking the house was empty, escaped before the cops arrived. I was so happy they were safe, but I also felt terrible for leaving them in harm's way. I knew that with those horrible people have been employed to get my husband and I out of the house. I'm sure if we took those pills or went home with them, they would have kidnapped us too. I told the police to go looking for them, but somehow they had just disappeared, like they never even existed. The only thing they could find was a credit card under Richard's name, which turned out to be fake, that was used at dinner in Terran and Airbnb. His supposed software company didn't exist. Either it was just a front for a human trafficking ring. At least that's what the police concluded. I have to believe them otherwise. I don't understand how they could have known where we lived to this day. I still can't believe how close my husband and I came to throwing away the lives of our entire family. I'm a single female who lives alone in a 1-bedroom apartment. I live on the first floor and moved in right around a year ago. This story takes place on Valentine's Day of last year. My new apartment was in a pretty large and new building, and I had a unit on the first floor. After living there for about a week or 2, it was Valentine's Day. I got up that morning to go to work and was going to leave at 7 a.m. When I opened up my door to leave my apartment, I saw that there was a heart-shaped Valentine taped to it. When I saw it, I thought that it was something left by the apartment management. They had left me a welcome thing with some small gifts, and my previous apartment would do that sort of stuff too. I didn't even read it and just put it on my countertop to look at when I got home from work. When I got home that day, I finally read the Valentine, and I quickly realized that it was not left by management. It said my name on it, and it was handwritten on the inside. It said that I was possibly the most beautiful girl in the entire apartment complex. The person then said they hoped we could spend next Valentine's Day together. I was really creeped out by this. The way that it was written was so weird, and I didn't know anybody there yet, at all. I had barely spoke to anybody in the hallways, so obviously I had no idea who did this, but clearly somebody had been watching me now, just mere hours later. I was in my kitchen and starting to cook. My kitchen is at the front of my apartment, right by the door when I'm at the counter. I faced the rest of my apartment, which is the living room and then the patio door at the other end. It was probably about 7 p.m. and dark outside. As I was standing at the counter, I suddenly noticed that a man was standing outside of my patio door and looking in. I didn't know who he was and had never seen him before. I ducked down behind the counter when I looked up. Again, several moments later, he was gone. I realized then that must be the guy who left me the Valentine, but I had never noticed him before. It made me wonder if he had been looking in my apartment windows previously, but I just didn't notice. I hope not. It was possible that he just saw me leaving to go to work or whatever, 'cause there were numerous apartments that looked out to the parking lot where my car was. Either way, somebody here was being as creepy as they could possibly be. I thought about calling the police or reporting him, but I didn't even have a good description of the guy. I only saw him for like a second, and he was outside, so it wasn't very clear at all. He just appeared to be a Caucasian male about 6'2" tall and darkish colored hair. I sent an email to apartment management letting them know what happened. I didn't know what could be done about it, though. For the rest of that night, everything was mostly fine. I had shut my curtains, obviously, and was now going to bed. But at that time, almost 11 p.m., I thought I heard the sound of my doorknob turning. I was in my bedroom, so I didn't hear it as well. I stopped what I was doing and listened. Then I heard a knock on the door. My heart started racing as soon as I heard it. I knew who it likely was. I got my phone and was ready to call the police. Then I quietly walked over to my door. I looked through the police hole, people to the other side. And when I did, I saw a man who certainly resembled the guy at my window. I called the police right then and there. Then I moved back into my bedroom to talk with them and say what the situation was. About a minute later, the guy knocked again. This was followed by another knock. About a minute after that, the police were on the way, and I hoped that they would get there fast. The man knocked once more, but this time I heard him yelling for help. I remember him asking if anybody was home, and if they could please come to the door because he needed help. I knew that this was probably just his desperate attempt to try to get me to open up the door for him. After that, I didn't hear anything for a little while. I assumed that he left, but he didn't. He stayed there all the way until the police arrived several minutes after that. They spoke with the man, and to me as well. I was really glad that the guy didn't run away. The man did not get arrested, but he did end up getting evicted from the apartment building, and he was also trespassed and not allowed to come back. And since that night, I haven't seen him.
One day at school, I randomly fell into conversation with a girl in my class named Aunt Caroline. We talked and traded socials, but then winter break started the next day, so I didn't think I'd ever really see her again. However, we ended up texting and FaceTiming a lot. It turned into a talking stage, so much so that I was excited to go back to school just to see her. When I saw Caroline in person again, I suddenly realized I had major feelings for her. I confessed my feelings, and to my elated relief, she felt the same way we hung out after school that day. But she told me her father would be pissed if she started dating a boy before he could meet them. I was nervous about it, but I agreed to go over to her house to meet him. As it turned out, her dad was totally chill with us dating, and I was glad he and I got off on the right foot afterward. Caroline took me to her bedroom to hang out with the door open. We talked for a while, getting closer and closer until it seemed like we were about to lean in for a kiss. But then all of a sudden, a random guy burst into the room. He was our age, and he looked shocked to see me there. I was confused, as I knew Caroline didn't have any brothers. So I started to think for a moment that she had another boyfriend. She quickly explained that this guy was her cousin Anthony, who lived nearby and would often come over unannounced just to hang out. She even asked Anthony if he wanted to chill with us, but he bitterly said that he'd leave us alone. That interruption was weird. But with my first girlfriend sitting next to me on the bed, I forgot about it. Almost instantly, we kissed and cuddled for hours from there. Our relationship rapidly escalated. I took her out on dates almost every single day. We had lunch together at school, and we pretty much stopped hanging out with our friends altogether. My friends were enthusiastically supportive, even cheering me on for bagging a baddie. Caroline's friends, however, were not. She said they were being mean to her, calling her fake, and ignoring her. There was even a random number texting her horrible things about how she was a loose hag and a traitor. Some of the things they were saying to her were just horrendous, I told her. I deal with it, but she didn't want me going after her friends. I agreed to be chill, but I found it hard to believe that her so-called friends would say such nasty things to her. They weren't the only problems, though I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched at school. It was like everyone was side-eyeing us, talking behind our backs, and spreading rumors. I wanted to get us away from all the drama, so I took Caroline out to lunch. We sat inside by a window while we were waiting for our food to come out, though. I also got a text from the same random number, but it wasn't just calling me a thirsty friend. Thief. It was a death threat I elected not to tell Caroline to avoid freaking her out about. 10 minutes later, we dug into our food. That's when I noticed over her shoulder that a sketchy-looking figure on a bicycle had stopped outside the restaurant and was looking in. They were wearing a hood over their face, so I couldn't see who they were or if they were looking at us, but they gave me the creeps still. I didn't let Caroline know about it. I wanted to keep her in good spirits later. We went to see a movie. Just some cheesy chick flick rom-com. We sat all the way in the back for privacy, but right before the movie started, I spotted a lone individual enter the theater and sit down near the front. It was weird to see a single person in there. As everyone else had a date, it was too dark for me to see who they were, but something about them was familiar. Of course, Caroline proved to be quite distracting. We basically made out through the whole movie. When it was finished, knew from the look in her eyes that it was finally time I drove us to an by park. It was late, so nobody was in the parking lot. I parked and turned off the lights. Then we slipped into the back seat. We started making out and taking off our clothes. I was psyched. I was finally going to lose my virginity. Then, out of nowhere, someone started pounding on the front window like they were trying to smash it. They shined a bright flashlight into the car and screamed at us to come out. I thought we were being busted by the cops, so we quickly put on our clothes. Then I opened the door, but it wasn't a cop standing outside the door. It was Caroline's cousin Anthony. He pulled me out of the car and started wailing on me. I fought back, but I didn't want to seriously hurt him. Caroline quickly pulled us apart and tried to get Anthony to calm down, but he was a wreck, screaming and sobbing with anger, saying I stole Caroline from him. Suddenly, it made sense he was the one following us and texting us threats because he loved Caroline in that kind of way. I tried to reason with Anthony, but almost as soon as I opened my mouth, he pulled out a knife and put it up to his throat. I quickly charged, tackling him to the ground, and pulling the knife away, he struggled, but I was thankfully able to restrain him. Caroline called the cops, who Baker acted him. Essentially, that means he sort of got arrested, but instead of being charged, he was placed in a facility for a few days until he was no longer a danger to himself or others. Anthony was later forced to transfer schools and live with another family member after that. Things went back to normal. Almost Caroline and I still have a committed and passionate relationship, but the Anthony thing still looks over us sometimes.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, comment and subscribe, or follow for more stories on Fun Tales for All.